Hey there, and welcome to the ColorStop color grading plugin demo. We're going to take a look at setting up the plugin, installing and running through the options and how easy it is to add your own custom color grades to your images using this plugin. So we're going to jump right into this. If you pick up this plugin, you'll find these are the contents of the zip file that's going to be downloaded. There's install notes in here. There's some pre-made presets in here as well. We'll take a look at those. But the installation is really very simple and straightforward as long as you have Adobe Photoshop 2023 or later with Adobe Creative Cloud installed. You simply just need to double click on this .ccx file. So we're going to double click. It's going to launch Creative Desktop. You will get a kind of a warning here that's a third-party plugin. That's okay. You're just going to go ahead and click Install and then click OK when it asks for if you want to install ColorStop by JHP plugin. And then it's going to come up and it's going to tell you it's installed. So once it's installed, we can close Creative Cloud. We can go ahead and minimize this folder, and you're going to see it's going to come right up here. And the first thing it's going to do is prompt you for your license key. So your license key will be in your order email. So when you place your order, you'll immediately get an email that has your download link to the zip file as well as your registration key. So there's 3 different registrations currently to choose from. You have personal, which includes a license for 2 active computers simultaneously. The professional license includes up to 4 active machines simultaneously. And then enterprise includes up to 10 active machines. So based on your needs, your studio, and what you're running, there's some options in there. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over to my email, and I'm just going to copy the license key, and all we need to do is paste in here and activate. And you're going to see here, if it's already being used by more than 2 devices, you're going to get a warning. All right, so you need to be sure that you're just using this on 2 machines. It will take an additional license if you're using this on more than 2 machines. So basically just be aware if you need to use the license on more than 2 active machines at a time, that will require either professional or the enterprise license. But now that I've made a correction to the key here, I should be able to click activate, and it's going to go ahead and tell me that activation was successful and we're ready to use the plugin. So once the plugin is activated, here's what I would recommend that we do. The first thing that I would like to do for myself when I'm using this is go ahead and minimize. I'm going to drag this over and just dock it onto the bar over here and then reopen it here. And I like to make this kind of full screen here, so we're just looking at the plugin. There's no need to see the document window during the color grading phase. And let's just make the image a little bit bigger. Alright, so once I kind of get this set, then it should always just return to this sizing and everything that you like for your preference once we get it preset in here. So this is kind of a look at the user interface to start with. So we have our preview image over here. One of the really nice things is this plugin does work non-destructively. So it will look at all of the layers in your stack. So if you do all of your editing and then just want to grade at the end, it's just looking at everything in your layer stack. All right, so it's very nice in that feature. But the first thing I'd recommend doing once getting this sized and docked is we're going to go up to your settings up here in the right corner. There's a few settings in here. So you have some undo steps you could set. By default, that's set to 10, and that's just to keep memory usage low, but you could always increase that. The one main thing you want to look at here is your preview display. So by default, this is set to sRGB monitor. What I would recommend doing is just temporarily resizing this so that you can see the preview image with the image on with your document image. All right, so you're going to notice that it's going to depend on your monitor profile, the type of monitor that you're using. This preview display, this color profile may need to be changed for your monitor. So you can see here, like by default for sRGB monitor for mine, because I'm using a wide gamut display, you can see my image is much more desaturated and things here than it is here. But all you need to do is click here on your preview display. So the P3 setting, you can see, gets me closer, but it's not quite there yet. But if I click on Adobe RGB, now I can see that those images look much more similar in nature. All right, so that's just important to get that set based on your monitor, starting based where those look the same, so that when your color grade is applied, it's going to be the image that you expect it to be back in the document window. All right, so that's why you're kind of presetting that to make sure you're picking the preview display that matches your document window. And don't worry, changing this does not change your document type or your color settings on the document itself at all. This is simply just a display setting for the plugin's preview window itself. All right, so it's not changing your document or anything. It's just matching it to the display window, and that's just because of how the plugin has to work. It can't necessarily access the same preview settings that your document window has. So that, again, it's just a quick little setting. Once you set that, then that'll be persistent, and that'll be there every time you open up the plugin. All right, so you shouldn't have to keep resetting that. Now, one more setting to look at here is the preview updates. Now, every computer is different. Some have a lot more processing power, more memory and things than others, faster graphic cards and all that. So there's just a setting in here that would allow you to click to change the preview updates. Now, what that means is as you start to move sliders and things in the controls over here, that's how often this preview window updates. If it's every frame, or you could click every second frame, every third, fifth, 10th, 20th, or 30th frame. So what that means is that you would have like a slight little lag in this preview window updating, but it would make the movements on the sliders much more fluid. Okay, so now with that said, you should probably not have to touch this. But we wanted to add that in there just in case maybe you have an older machine, it's a little bit slower, it might run faster for you as far as your controls. To just bump this up to maybe every 5th or every 10th frame, or maybe even every 30th. But you should be able to use it on every frame with no issues. All right, that's just a setting to be aware of that's in there. And then there's some other settings you likely won't have to mess with, but if you had some errors or something like that, there are some diagnostics and some log exports on here that maybe we might ask for if we're trying to troubleshoot an issue or something. So that's just all technical stuff in the background. But then you do have your about here that's going to tell you based on your email address who this license is licensed to. So that information is in there. And then you have a button to, if you wanted to deactivate this license on this machine because you needed to activate it on another machine. Remember, a personal license, for instance, you can run concurrently on 2 machines, so maybe you need to deactivate here and activate on another one. That would be the button to deactivate here, so that would free up that license seat for another machine. All right, so that's the options within the settings menu here. So not a whole lot to mess with, just basically this preview display is the main one you're going to look at. All right, so let's keep going. We're going to close the settings window, and we're going to go ahead and jump right into the top tab right here, was the presets and LUTs. All right, so there's a couple different things to talk about. The difference between presets and LUTs. First of all, so a preset would be coming into these controls, making changes. So let's say we just start right here. I'm just going to make a basic change and just pull this a couple different ways. Let's say we like this for whatever reason. We want to save this as a repeatable preset. Well, if we come up to our presets here, all you need to do is just type in a new name. So we're just going to call this new and save as preset. It's going to go ahead and it's going to grab a screen grab of your preview, and it's going to save that as just a clickable button to apply that preset. So in other words, if we reset everything and we wanted to apply this preset, we're just going to click this and there you go, it reapplies it. Now the beauty of a preset is it saves all of your slider and value settings in all of these controls. So that's a good thing about a preset, is it saves all these controls. So if you could come through and manually adjust some of these slider positions as needed. All right, so that's the idea of a preset. Now the difference of a LUT So that's just a predefined lookup table. So you could grab LUTs from all over the internet from different places. You could use some of the same LUTs you might use in Photoshop currently, and you could import those into this plugin, and that would create a base kind of grading point to go from. So let's see if I can locate a LUT here. So let's just say I brought one of these LUTs in. So you can see I've got this is one that I purchased a while back, this Avengers Endgame green color casting LUT. So it's applying that to this image, but you'll notice down here all the slider values are just all at their zeroed out positions. Alright, so what the LUT is doing is it's applying that LUT grade over the image, but then you can still come down here and adjust all of your sliders and values and things. Alright, so the difference is the preset is going to have all of these slider values set, whereas a LUT is just kind of like a base stock grade that's happening that you can then adjust on top of. Alright, so that's the difference. Now, you can also create a grade, and then you could export that as a LUT. So if you wanted to take this look and you wanted to export it to use in another application, or maybe you wanted to import it into a video project or something like that, you could export that LUT and then use that LUT in another application. Now, the other thing you can also do is you can load presets in here. So with your download is going to include 10 preset files in that, and all you would need to do is choose your presets folder, and then you would go to your download folder and just make sure you open up the ColorStop presets folder. And it's okay if you don't see anything listed in there, it's fine. The application knows to look in that folder. We're just going to select folder, and you're going to see it's going to load up these default actions. So there's 10 of them here. So again, these are all actual presets. So if we click on the first one, you're going to see it's going to automatically apply this preset color grade, but then also down here the values for all these are already set because they're actual preset files. So you could come through and you could tweak each of these, and let's come up to our exposure curve, and let's say we wanted to make just an exposure adjustment just for the sake of doing this. If you come back up to your preset, you're going to see there's a little orange dot in the corner. That just indicates that there's been a change made to this preset. So if you wanted to save this as another new preset, call it new 2, save current, you're going to see that's going to save a screen grab of that, so you kind of know what that grade's doing, and with the new name, and now they both just become easily applicable by clicking on those and adding that preset value. Alright, so that's one of the really nice things about this. Being able to create these custom presets means that if you're working with, say, an album spread or something where you want a nice consistent look across all the images, well, you can just load those images up and just quickly reapply this preset as needed. Alright, so just know that you can also then export your presets. So if you wanted to create them on one machine, export all your presets, import them onto another machine, you can absolutely do that. And then the final thing to note in here is you could turn these thumbnails on and off. So if you wanted to turn these off just to make them little tabs that you can click on, or you can see the images here if you kind of want a visual reminder of what that preset is doing, you can do that. And then you can also delete presets if you want to take them out. Alright, so that's all of your preset and LUT control up here. So I'm just going to click reset all. So reset simply resets all of the slider values all at once. Alright, so there's presets and LUTs. So now let's jump down in here and start to take a look at control options that are in here. So starting at the top on number 1, this is our primary balance. So the primary balance is basically setting the overall scene, okay, as for the color grade. So if we look on our left panel here, you can get it kind of a visual representation that as the slider goes up, things get brighter. As it goes down, it gets darker. As it goes to the left, it gets desaturated. And as it goes to the right, it gets more saturated. So if we wanted to add saturation and make it darker, we would come this way. Or more saturated and brighter, we would come this way. Or more desaturated and darker. All right, so you can kind of just slide this around until you get the result that you like. So you're going to get a nice real-time update here so that you can see what's happening in real time. So let's set this about right here. Now, one more thing to point out is below these, you're going to notice this range that's set. Now, by default, on this left control here, the range is set to 25%, basically a quarter of the available range. And that's just to help prevent things from going, too far in the wrong direction too quickly. But if you find, hey, I want this to be a little bit brighter or more saturated than it is, you can increase this range by any percentage you want. So let's make this 50%. And now you'll take notice that the window updates, so you can see it's even more bright and more saturated or more desaturated, and it gives us room to push that even further. So we could push more saturation and more brightness. And if you wanted more, you could make this 100%. So this would give you the full range to add tons of brightness or darkness or tons of saturation in here, all from the start. So feel free to customize that range for whatever you like. I like it between 25 and 50%. So I'm just going to bring it back here. I think I want to add a little bit of saturation, a little bit of brightness. So something about right here looks pretty good. All right, so that's the left side panel. Now the right side of this panel, this is going to create basically your overall color cast for the image, kind of like a base color cast. So you'll see it's all visual here as well, and you could also set this range. So if you wanted to, by default this one is 100, you could take it down to 25%, and you see you have very little movement in here. So if you're finding that you just like to do slight color grades, you could go ahead and turn this range down a little bit so that you're not getting as much kind of boost out of those values, but I like to leave mine at 100. And so if we wanted to make the overall cast of this warmer, we could come up into these yellow-orange areas, or cooler tones would come down here into these blue-greens. So you can see this is, again, just creating kind of like an overall color cast value to the image. So what I like to do is just kind of move this slider around while visually looking at what's happening here to see what it is that I like. And I feel like when I get a little bit right in here, I kind of like the look of that. That looks pretty cool to me. Now at any point you could click the eye up here if you want to disable to see that before and after. You can also click the split pane button down here, and that'll give you a pane slider here, so you could slide that back and forth and look at the before and after that way. There is a zoom down here, so if you wanted to zoom in and take a closer look, you could. All right, and then there's also a help on each of these tabs. So you could click the help. It's going to tell you what this does and how to use it, and give you a tip down here at the bottom. All right, so then you just click that again. And then you could always just click reset if you wanted to reset that one specific tab that you're on. But I kind of liked where we were at, so we'll just click undo and reset that. All right, so that's the primary balance. Next is our exposure curve. So the exposure curve is just set to a flat value here. It's got 5 points preset to it. You can add any point along this line by just clicking on the line, and it'll add a new point. And then double clicking on a point will delete that point. All right, so you can add as many values along the curve here as you like. So it is looking at the exposure curve based on grayscale value. One really cool feature that I want to point out that we added into here that I found very useful is this mask feature. Now what the mask is simply doing is it's not masking out an area, but it's creating a mask that's going to show you where on the image these values are going to be affected. So if whatever point is highlighted, you can see the mask is going to give you a red mask, and so it shows you based on this point of this exposure curve, that's going to affect all of these highlight areas in the skin here. If I would select this point, now you can see it affects much more of the area, because now we're getting into a lot of those midtones. As we get down here to the shadows, now you can see a lot of the skin tones would be ignored, but all these shadow areas would be affected. As we get down here, now it's just really the darkest parts of the image that would be affected. So I found this mask button very, very useful when I go to move some of these sliders at figuring out, okay, what specific parts of the image are going to be affected here. So very, very useful feature right here. So you can if I turn the brightest one on, it's really only affecting this bright highlight here along the edge of the dress. So maybe a few little specular highlights in the jewelry and things. All right, so I found this very, very useful. So if I just wanted to pull in some of those shadows and stuff, maybe down here, then I know that I can just turn this mask off, and then I kind of know what to expect when I start dropping some of these values. It's just going to deepen those shadows up a little bit. All right, and then if I want to bring more into that, then I can come back here and really start to bring that down just a bit more. So we'll come through here, we'll make a few curves adjustments, and I kind of like that. So making it a little bit moodier, a little bit warmer. Very cool. Let's come down here to the contrast curve. Same thing, you have a mask on here, so clicking the mask and then picking a button or a kind of a point anywhere along the line is going to tell you what area would be affected there. So if you just wanted to add some highlight contrast, you could pick this one, and you could bring some of those highlights up or down if you wanted to take some contrast out. Same thing if you wanted some mid-tone contrast up or down, that could be pulled out here. So I don't want to do a whole lot with the contrast, but I think that looks pretty good. I just wanted to decontrast those midtones just a shade, so that looks good. Come down to our color scattering. You'll take notice right off the bat in the color scattering, we have shadows on the left, highlights on the right, and we do have ranges set for those as well. So just like with our primary balance, you could set a range on those if you wanted to limit how far these could be pushed. So let's set these to 50% for me personally, and then in the shadows, if I wanted to push a little bit of kind of a blue-green value, we would just push this around. Or if I wanted to add a little bit more warmth into those shadows, I could push that into some of these warmer tones, which I do like for this image. And then I do like to turn my visibility on and off just to see where things are going. So now on the highlight side, again, we could push some of those skin tones warmer or cooler depending on the overall look that you're trying to achieve here. So I like to just push this around till I'm happy with what I'm seeing. So I think I'm actually going to slightly cool off those highlights in the skin, but warm up those shadows, and that's looking really cool. I do like to turn my split screen off and on quite a bit to see where things are going. All right, below that, number 5 is our Filmic HSL. So this is going to allow you to take certain color ranges and push them around, either more saturated, less saturated, or push them into different color ranges. All right, so again, on the left is shadows, on the right is highlights. Once again, there are ranges down here if you wanted to limit how much of that range is available to you. You certainly can do that. So for instance, let's take, there's a lot of, well, let's take the yellow in the dress right here, because that's kind of a particular color. So now that's likely going to fall into our highlight range. So if we come over kind of to this yellow portion here, you can see as we push this towards center, things go desaturated. And as we push towards the outer ring, they're going to get much more saturated. So I like to kind of stay around this center ring. It's kind of a good balance area. But you could also push this left and right and push it into some other color ranges. So you could push that a little bit warmer, or you could push it a little bit more to the green. And then you can move all of these accordingly to kind of affect certain types of color ranges. All right, so just kind of know that this exists in here. I'm going to go ahead and reset this. So if you wanted to push some of your shadow values into certain areas and things like that, that certainly could be done. And the best thing that I always say to do is just kind of get in here and play around with the sliders and see what does what. That's the good thing about having the real-time update here, is you can kind of see what's happening. And then we get to make decisions on what it is that we like or don't like. So I'm going to push that a little bit more towards those magentas because I think that looks pretty cool for this image. Yeah, it's just adding me a nice little touch of magenta in those shadows, and I'm going to leave the highlight. I don't really want to change highlights right now, so I'm going to leave those alone. Number 6 is our density curve. So remember, at any time too, you can click the help. It's going to tell you exactly what it does. It's going to tell you how to use it, and it's going to give you a bit of a tip right here. All right, so adds density, the deep saturated yet solid quality of film to colors you choose. So again, there's a mask on this one as well. So all these horizontal curve type sliders, you're going to see there is a mask option. So we could turn the mask on, and then if we pick a point along the line, it's going to highlight in red the areas that would be affected. Well, there's a lot of warms and reds in this image, so of course we would expect that to happen on that kind of spot on the curve. You can see at this point it's getting much more into those yellow greens, so that's really affecting a lot of like the dress and a bit of the color cast on her skin. And as we would get up into these other colors, we expect not to see, you know, really anything happening because there's not really any of those tones within the image. But I want to take this this kind of dress color here. Let's turn the mask off, and then again you could kind of add a little bit of density or take some density out, so you can see it's a little less vibrant there. I'm going to actually add a little bit back into that, something kind of like that right there, and that looks good to me. Oh, I double clicked in the wrong spot. Let's bring that back up. There we go. All right, so that looks good. So that's our density curve. Next, number 7 is our chroma curve. So chroma is interesting. So it's saturation that reacts to what's already there. So it's really about dull muted colors, okay? So thinking about the difference between the dull colors and the vivid ones. Now again, the beauty is because we have our mask feature, we can turn that on and then click at any point along the curve to see, okay, what does it seeing as the duller vivid tones in here. So as we click on each one, it's going to show like that would basically affect the whole image. If we click down here, that kind of removes like that dress part of the image. The middle one really focused more on the dress, kind of the lips here. And so this is going, and then we're really, you know, in these high saturated areas. We don't have any high saturated areas in the image, so of course nothing is selected there. All right, so you could come down here and you could bump things up and down. We'll turn the mask off so we can see. Again, that's affecting pretty much the whole image. So if you wanted to, again, it's not including the dress and the mouth, because again, we saw that was affected over here in this part of the curve. So if we wanted to desaturate that, we'd have to bring that part of the curve down. All right, so this is kind of that, what the chroma balance is doing here. And so we're just going to tweak this a little bit. I think I'm going to leave that up there. Let me see the difference here. Again, I like to see things in real time, so I'm going to add just a little bit to that, and I think that looks good right there. All right, so that's our chroma curve. Next, we're going to come down to our radiance. Radiance is, again, a curve based on grayscale value. Once again, we have a mask. We'll click on, I just like to start in the middle point to see, okay, here's everything that would be affected by a radiance curve at that point. All right, so the skin's not affected, but a lot of the shadows here. So again, it is looking at a light to dark value and exposure range here. All right, so that kind of tells me everything. Like if I turn the mask on and I click all the points, it kind of tells me what I need to know about what part of the image fall where visually. So I'm a very visual learner. I like that visual cue of what's happening where. So that's why I like to initially click on here and see what's happening. All right, so your radiance is really about making those tones in those range kind of a little brighter and more, just have like a little bit more oomph to them. You can see how that's kind of lifting some of those shadow areas, which I like, how it's kind of like pulling some information up in some of those shadowy areas around the eyes and things. I think looks really, really cool and interesting. But I don't want to go too far. But again, I could always bring that back down, and we could bring those values down into a darker range. But I like getting a little bit of information back in there, so I'm going to lift that just a little. All right, and that looks good for my radiance. Below that, number 9 is our saturation curve. Once again, looking at everything from a lightness value. Now, these scales are all, you know, we should expect to see all the same things as we click on these, because again, it's looking at this from a light to dark range. But again, just showing the mask feature there. But if there was somewhere where I wanted to add some particular saturation based on the lightness value, like say in skin and things, I could come and I could bring that, that saturation value way up or way down, and I could saturate or desaturate those specific ranges. All right, I don't think I need to, for my taste, really move much of that around, but I will just temporarily move a couple things just to see what I like. I think that's looking pretty good right there. Just a small tweak to that curve, and that allowed me to come on down to the shadow and highlight settings. So now we see on the left, once again, shadows, on the right are highlights. These sliders are broken down by CMYK. And so on the shadow side, for instance, in the shadows, if we wanted to push more of this cyan tones, we could push that in, or we could push more magenta. You're going to see it's going to start to wash things out, but then we could move our magentas. If we wanted to push just a bit of that green, we would go to the left, or more magenta to the right. We could add a little bit of blue by pushing this way. So, and then of course RK is our black value, so we could make those shadows a more rich black type of tone. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to add just a touch of that green into those shadows, just to kind of flatten out those shadows with a little bit of that green tonality. That looks good. I like that. Highlights I'm not going to mess with much, but again, you could come in here and move these sliders around as well if you wanted to add some, different tones into the highlight values. But we'll kind of leave that basically where it was at. And then the last option that we're going to look at here is our bloom. So if we're wanting to create some glow, or maybe like that glamour glow type of effect, then what we need to do is first, of course, by default, the amount's going to be set to 0. We need to add some bloom amount in here. But then the next thing we need to change is our threshold. The threshold is going to determine kind of what range of brightness value the bloom is going to affect. So right now the threshold's set pretty high, so it'd have to be a pretty bright highlight for the bloom to show up. But if we start to bring the threshold down, we will start to expect to see some bloom occurring on some of the highlights. And you can see it's starting to happen on the highlights on the face and the arm right here currently. So as we bring that threshold down even more, you can see we're getting more of that bloom. And if we increase the bloom amount, then we can really start to see it happening here. So if we turn this off and on, you can kind of see what that bloom is doing. It's finding those highlight ranges based on our threshold. The radius is going to be how far out that bloom radiates around its source. I like to leave that kind of low. All right, again, we can mess with the threshold there. We can mess with the amount to really get the effect that we're looking for. So I wouldn't want it that much. Likely I wouldn't leave much of any bloom on this, but I do kind of like some of what's happening there. But just to show what's happening, so this is how we're going to kind of create that bloom. But the other thing that we can do is under the halation here, we can also add some light spill, some color cast to that bloom. So if we turn that light spill up, we'll see that that bloom is now going to take on a color cast of whatever the color shift value is set to. And so the saturation would also affect how saturated that bloom is. So if we wanted to push that more to like the yellows, we would just move that slider up for that warm bloom. Or if for some reason you wanted to move it up to like cyan, you could do that. And you could change the amount of that light spill. It's going to change how much color is on that bloom. So it may seem kind of weird on this image, but maybe if you're doing something that had a colored light source and you were trying to add some bloom to it, think of like a composite, maybe with a lightsaber or something like that. You could add some colored bloom on here that would look really interesting. So let's turn this back down. Again, I don't think I would really want to add much of that here, but it is an option. And then let's turn the amount of this bloom down. And I think I will leave just a touch of it in there. I do like the look of that. That's pretty cool. And so now we could look at our slider here to see this is before our color grade. and this is after this full color grade has been added. All right, you can see quite a difference here, and I really like the look of that. So let's turn this split screen off. Now what I could come back up and do is come to the presets, and now let's say I had a series of these images that are, you know, all against this wall in this same type of look, and I wanted to apply the same thing. Well, I would just save this as a preset of whatever name I wanted it to be. Again, I'll just call it new to keep it simple, and save current, and it grabs that thumbnail, and now I have it as a preset. Now, once we have things where we like, if we'll see, it's still not been applied to the document yet. But once we have everything where we like it, we're just going to come up here and we're going to click the apply button. It's going to take a look at the entire layer stack. Now on this one there's only one, but it will look at everything, and it's going to merge everything up and put it up into a new layer right at the top. Alright, so there is our color grading layer completely added into the image here. So at this point you could add more things on top of this if you wanted to. You could export from this point. The beauty is if you needed to make a change, let's say you needed to delete this layer and for some reason you know, you needed to do some retouching, and I'm just going to make this a super obvious illustration right here. So for whatever reason we wanted a paint stroke right here. Again, this is just for illustration. If we open up the plugin again, we're going to see that's not showing up yet because we have to just simply click the refresh button here, and that's going to take a look at our layer stack again just to show you it is looking through the layers, and then you could reapply this with your change. Again, it's going to look at the entire layer stack and just apply it as a complete image based on all of the layers, just so they can see that is working. But then again, the beauty is, you know what, that was kind of stupid. That doesn't look very good. Let's just delete that. Let's refresh and let's reapply again. Alright, so hopefully you can see it's pretty easy to use because you have so many visual cues going on here. And then it'd be very easy to jump over to another image. So if you wanted to come over here, and anytime you change your document window, if you bring up the plugin, all you simply have to do is click refresh, and it's just going to load that image. And now you can see it's already preloaded that image based on this preset that's in here. So if you wanted to reset it, you simply could just click reset all, and that gives you your default preset or your default values on your sliders and your curves. You could always come through and click one of the presets that are included with the download to give you a starting point. So I'm going to just click through these just to quickly see this is what each of the presets are doing. So again, think of these as starting points. They may look really good on the image that you bring up, or they could be a starting point. So this unhinged one, I like that as a starting point for this image quite a bit. So what I would do is bring this preset up, and now I could come down here and I could determine, okay, maybe I want this a little bit brighter though, so I could bring this value up. That looks pretty good. Maybe I want to just back off on a little bit of that overall yellow tone. I think that looks pretty good right about in there. I do like that. I just wanted to back it off a little bit. Of course, you could play with exposure curves and things if you wanted to kind of flatten out those shadows, make it just a touch more cinematic. We could do that. So then it's just a process of coming through and, you know, be making any changes, which I kind of really like where it's at, so I don't think I would make too many changes myself. But you can see all the values are preset in here, and then once you come up with a new look that you like, you could either save this as a new preset so that it could be reapplied again. Grabs a little thumbnail, click apply. That's going to take a second. Look at your layers, and there we go. We got our new color grade applied right on top of that image. Okay, so there's a look at ColorStop and the options that exist within here. I hope that you find this is really easy to use and that you're getting a lot of really great effects. As always, I would love to see what you guys are creating using this. Please feel free to share. I would love to feature some of your work on the ColorStop page and on social media. So please feel free to share your befores and afters, and I hope to see you very soon with some new work. See you later.